Paxton claims victory at SCOTUS, but really loses. Dan Patrick asked the Senate to explore eliminating property taxes, and scandal-plagued Jonathan Stickland has opened up several new businesses with the help of RPT chair Matt Rinaldi. We get into that and so much more on this week's episode of Seeing Red, right now.
Welcome to the Seeing Red podcast with Andi Turner and Garrett Fulce, checking up on Texas policies and politics with some federal issues thrown in, like the assault weapons ban, interest rate hikes, you get it, but it's mostly Texas, since we can't ignore the big stuff either. And now, here are your hosts, Andi Turner and Garrett Fulce.
Hey everybody, welcome back to this week's Seeing Red. We're glad to have you all. If you've joined us on YouTube, hi. You will notice some new graphics, and God bless Garrett and all the hard work he puts in on the editing on this. I know it would take me years to figure it out, and he's just right there with it. So thank you very much. And if you are on our podcast, welcome back. If you are new, we are thrilled to have you. We have much to talk about today. But Garrett, oh my God, what is Jonathan Stickland up to now?
Oh, Lord only knows. It looks like the scandal-plagued former whatever with the FinTexas Liberty and current owner of Pale Horse Strategies or operator or whatever his title is, has opened a couple new businesses. He labeled one Ratmaster Holding, which is apparently his old gamer tag from, I don't know, Xbox Live or World of Warcraft or whatever game he used to play. It's like Ratmaster Holdings LLC or something. And he opened up another one with some sort of patriot name in it. What's interesting is that the person who organized it, whenever you create a business, you have an organizer, someone mail can go to, things like that, is the illustrious chairman of our Republican Party, Matt Rinaldi. So, Stickland has been largely out of the public eye since October when he was found to be meeting with Nick Fuentes. There was large outcry from Dan Patrick, Tim Dunn, the person who funds the FinTexas Liberty and a lot of the ventures that Jonathan Stickland is involved with, said that it was a mistake, a blunder. I think Dunn said it was a mistake and Patrick said it was a blunder. But largely Jonathan Stickland, who wants a name, again, he just named his company Ratmaster Holdings. He was an online antagonist. Some might call it a troll. I don't want to characterize it one way or the other. But he's had a diminished social media and online presence since this controversy. But it looks like he's trying to get back into the game a little bit, one way or the other, or at the very least keep making money off of the system as it exists currently. So it's just, I think it's interesting that Matt Rinaldi is, he represents Jonathan Stickland and the Wilkes brothers as an attorney, while also
running the RPT,
being the chairman of the RPT. And when you're an attorney, you have, certain responsibilities to your clients. And when those people have direct interactions with the boards you're governing, it's kind of gives pause to whether or not you're acting in the best interest of your clients or the best interest of your constituents when, which are the Republican voters of Texas.
Right. Yeah. And I'm sorry, but Ratmaster just seems highly appropriate. My opinion, but it does seem very apt.
Yeah, I also want to make sure that we give credit where credit's due. Our friend of the show, Mark McCaig, was the one who broke that story. Yeah. So go read his article on his website, thetexasvoice.com, to kind of get the more of the granular details of that. But it's just, Matt Rinaldi is happy to help, over here with make sure Jonathan Stickland can get his companies up and running and fundraise however that works. But the RPT fundraising numbers are still not that great. And I'm not sure if the Q1 stuff has come out yet from the federal side, but, right. We don't have enough money in the account to really push back. And it really came to bear this week when the federal campaigns released their numbers. And it looks like Colin Allred, in his Q1 fundraising, direct campaign contributions had something like 9 million 9.5 million, 9.1 million, something like that. Cruz only brought in 6.5, but he has a number of other accounts that people donate to. So they brought in about the same amount of money. I think Cruz still has a cash on hand advantage to date. It's not as large as you'd like it to be when you're the incumbent of a state like Texas. And the DSCC, which is the Democrat Senatorial Campaign Committee, which is the official party apparatus for the Senate campaigns, has announced that Texas is one of their big targets because they don't really have a lot of other things to target. They're playing defense in like 4 states. They have really no offensive opportunities. Texas is one of their best chances. It's not a great chance by any means. It's Democrats putting money into Texas is usually a good thing because it's just money they're not going somewhere else. Oh,
yeah,
it's money not going somewhere else.
Yeah,
but you have the situation where on the national level, they're going to need to put money someplace because they want to. They're going to have to spend money. Texas is likely going to get a lot of it, and Cruz is going to have to match those numbers. I mean, Beto ended up outraising him last time and got it within 3 points, even while Abbott was winning by 10 points. It's going to be a different scenario this time. Allred has been playing, kind of trying to claim to be a moderate. Lord only knows, like he's a national Democrat. He's not going to be a moderate when he gets to the Senate, but that's the way he's playing it. And he didn't take any crazy left-wing positions in the primary. Well, I'm sure he did, but like he didn't. He played it as well as he could. He played it for a general. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, he wasn't. He at least from what I saw, I didn't see anything that was extreme left. Right. So,
and I mean, and he wasn't Beto with saying he's going to go take your AR-15s, right?
Right. Learned that lesson.
Yeah. Like he probably still will, but he didn't say it, so there's no copy that they can run in ads to do it.
I actually got a press inquiry the other day. Apparently, speaking of AR-15s, apparently there is a bill, and it was filed on March 6th. It has not gone to markup, is going nowhere. Mm-hmm. But a Democrat out of Missouri, whose name I cannot remember, filed a bill that said when there is a mass shooting, congressmen will, I forget if it was not receive their pay or receive far, far less until this is resolved. And I did not take the call because it's not a state issue. But I got to tell you, there's no chance in heck that the congressmen are going to vote to curb their salary.
No, they never.
There's no chance. On either side, it's like the dumbest bill ever. And I mean, I understand. Believe me, I understand the press, and they have a tough job to do. I get the feeling though that maybe this guy is a little younger and looking to stir the pot. And I went and looked at it, and it was introduced March 6th, and it hasn't gone to markup. It's going nowhere, and it's got no co-sponsors. Anyway, sorry.
There's a lot of legislation like that at the federal level, especially when you have this Congress that's so close to being just a split government that it's not much can get through. I mean, the Republican coalition is more of it's just not a governing majority. So there's no real governing majority in the House, so nothing's really getting done except for the most obvious things. Right. And even then, it usually takes pulling a lot of teeth. So it's frustrating.
Yeah.
To kind of have those issues pop up, but nothing's going to get done on, especially like an issue like gun control. And no, of course, the Congress is never going to say no, we can't pay us while whatever. It is I think the closest thing they ever had to something like that was sequestration. I don't think they're ever going to do it again. So that was when Obama agreed that they would cut. There was some sort of the negotiation, but there would be automatic cuts to the budget, but it would be including military spending. So there was it ended up the Republicans and being like, this is actually fine, and things just got cut for a while until Trump got there. So that's one of many issues when it comes to the federal government where it differs from the state.
Well, and the speaker I was watching this morning, the speaker is
Johnson or Phelan?
Johnson, Speaker of the of Congress, Speaker of the House in Congress. is actually having a tough time. And I watched briefly, I watched some statements he made, and he considers himself a wartime speaker. Now,
Mm.
I don't have an opinion on the man one way or the other, but I got to tell you, if you're a wartime speaker, it's kind of like being a wartime consigliere. For any of you that may have seen the Godfather, I'm not seeing that from him, but perhaps he's alluding to something coming forward. But yeah, he's got some problems. He's got some real problems.
Well, there's a lot happening internationally where there's a lot of moving parts, and America's enemies are feeling emboldened. You have Iran attacking
Yeah.
Israel just openly, just
Yep.
throwing the hundreds of missiles and drones at Israel. China's agitating, and you have Russia at war in Ukraine, doing it's more. Those are more Cold Wars with the West, but they're still active war zones. So there's a lot happening internationally because America is receded from the global stage, and these other actors are trying to fill in the gap. And you can look at America's foreign policy over the past 40 years and see certain mistakes that were made or not made, or what could be better. But right now, the situation is he might not be wrong. He might end up being a wartime speaker by the end of it. But you got to keep in mind, Joe Biden has some of the worst foreign policy instincts of any national politician in a couple generations. He's like the only person who said they shouldn't, like, he's famously told Obama he shouldn't kill Osama bin Laden whenever they had that opportunity to effectively kill him. Like, Biden didn't think it'd be a good idea, apparently, or something to that effect. Like, those are the kind of instincts that Biden has. And then he's just like, oh, let's just withdraw everyone from Afghanistan right away. See how well that worked out.
And not a Texas senator, obviously, but Marco Rubio made the rounds on the Sunday circuit, and they were talking about the bill to finance Israel and Ukraine. I'm sorry, a little slow. Drink more coffee. So he said, look, this is a question of supporting our troops that are over there. Absolutely, yeah. I support Israel, but we can't have a discussion about supporting these guys without tending to our own backyard. And he was talking about border issues. And I was like, good for you, because you can't be sending. Absolutely, we need to be supporting our troops. There is no question. Let me be very, very clear about that. But if you are not also protecting our own borders, and I know that for people who don't live in Texas or Florida, Arizona, Southern California, this doesn't feel as imminent to them. People living in New York State or, in Michigan or whatever, it doesn't feel the same because they're not in your backyard. Right. It's not happening in your backyard. And so I think that bill is going to be very interesting to see if they do manage to include some kind of protection for our southern border.
Well, a lot of Republican House members, they came up with a talking point where Biden already has the power to do it. Why pass more legislation? And it's more of an election. There's some election gamesmanship going on with that for sure.
Yeah.
I don't know the intricacies of immigration law well enough to opine too much on whether they're right or not.
Mm-hmm.
My gut is that it's just they don't want to give Biden a paper victory right now when he's still not going to do anything with it, and then he can kind of push immigration to the side for a little bit, because that is the number one issue when it comes to voters across the country, and especially in a swing state, I guess, kind of like Texas, right? Where, immigration has been the number one issue on Texas voters' minds since COVID kind of dropped out of it.
Yes, absolutely. No.
But it's also a number one issue across the country. It's just not to the same degree as it is in Texas. It's like, if you look at the polling, it's the number one issue for voters is immigration.
Really? Because I would have thought outside,
it's like 30 to 40% of is people's number one issue.
I would have thought outside of very red states, that it would have been abortion.
Now that's a number. It's a big issue, certainly, and it
But
could
not
be a
number
big
one.
issue but not number one. And I'm talking about like general polling, because then you had looking at the difference between swing voters, number one issue, and just the general population's number one issue. But
Interesting.
it's
Interesting.
you have to look at that's just a different crosstab for sure. So
Yeah, and that may or may not change. I don't expect it to change, but when I'm talking to people who are not like political nerds like we are, and I am proud to be a political nerd, I try to explain to them that like it's April and all kinds of things can happen between now and election day. And everybody's familiar with the October surprise. So I don't know what's going to happen, but that's when Hillary Clinton with her emails, that's when that came out, was the end of September, early October. And she just couldn't recover from that.
Kind of. The October surprise was that James Comey, was reopening the investigation because they found more emails on Anthony Weiner's laptop. But the emails had come out a year and a half before. Like that had been known for a year and a half, but there was that reopen. They closed the investigation, and like 4 months before the election, they just announced that they were going to be re-looking into the emails they found on Anthony Weiner's computer, that because he shared it with the computer with his then wife, Huma Abedin, who was Hillary Clinton's chief of staff. So you never know what it's going to be, and it's always going to be something in a different election. I remember in 2014, Ebola popped up at the last second. Mm-hmm. There was the Ebola madness. Obama made the gaffe of saying that there was going to be a referendum on him, which was not something the president should say in the second term midterm election. Because it's true, but you don't want the other side to be able to put it into ads. And then, you never know what the October surprise is going to be. It's usually not opposition research. It's usually just whatever, some crazy story is going to pop up and be the thing that drives the media narrative through the end of the election.
Well, and then of course Trump is on trial, and maybe I'm sure there will be an appeal, but that verdict may come down well before October, depending on depending on how long it takes to present all the facts. But and I was watching, I don't know what, this morning, and they were saying, this is the only trial that these are the only charges that could ostensibly be tried before the election. And somebody was explaining to me that on all the other charges that had to do with things he did during his presidency, if he gets elected president again, then those charges go away. However you feel about that, that's what happens.
I mean, kind of regardless, if he wins re-election, even if he's in prison, he'd get released on January 20th. And he'd be a free man while he's president. There's a pretty clear constitutional mandate that no state, no locality, no whatever can like arrest and imprison the president while they're president. Doesn't mean they can't charge him or or run a trial. It probably means you can't run a trial while he's president either. But if you've already run the trial, if he's in prison, there's nothing to say that a felon or whatever, state level felon, can't be on the ballot and win. So
you can't vote, like you're a convicted felon, you can't vote, but you can be president. And I'm not talking about Trump. I'm talking about anybody. Like I'm not
right. Because when you look at constitutional requirements, what it takes to, whatever, it's pretty bare bones of what the requirements are. And there's not a lot of exclusions. Right. And the Supreme Court has consistently held that states cannot add additional burdens or take burdens away or requirements away for federal office. And this came up a couple times. And historically, one was like they called the LBJ rule. LBJ wanted to run for either House and Senate or Senate and President or Senate and Vice President, and didn't want to give up his Senate seat or House seat. And Texas passed a law that allowed him to do both at the same time, and or or Texas had passed a law saying you couldn't run for 2 federal offices at the same time, and then the Supreme Court came in and said you can do it. There's no thing against it. I remember that was kind of an issue. Like there was a law in the books in Kentucky. Yeah, separate. The state can't put a restriction on the federal government's requirements. So, it's just that's one of those things. There's that, and it's also I think Arkansas had passed a term limit, congressional term limit bill at some point, and the Supreme Court said the states can't do it. It has to be a constitutional amendment since it's a federal court. So the states will oftentimes have term limits on their governors or even on their legislatures. California has one of the strictest term limits in the country. I think you can only be a rep for 6 years, 3 terms. And it kind of shows you that what happens whenever that happens is like the bureaucracy takes over. But anyways, so
speaking of federal things, Garrett, somebody's claiming a win at SCOTUS.
Ken Paxton came out big today, or big yesterday, and said that he won a big victory at the Supreme Court of the United States. The community notes on Twitter came in, as well as lots of reporting from just different folks across the Twitter sphere and in the media sphere, and it's like, dude, you lost big. Because here's what happened. Because you're not going to get this from Texas Scorecard, but here's what happened on this case. Some property owners near I-10 east of Houston live on the north side of I-10. The state basically built this median along I-10 with the idea that if there were major hurricanes or flooding events, that the north side of I-10 would flood, but you would still have the south side open for traffic, and they can make it 2-way, which is a compelling government need. That makes sense. And it worked. And during Harvey and during some other flooding in 2019, that area flooded the way it was supposed to, and then flooded into these people's property, damaging it tremendously. And these people sued the state, saying that you basically turned our property into stormwater storage and destroyed our property. And this is an illegal taking under the 5th Amendment of the Constitution.
And by the way, I just want to point out that your source on this is the actual SCOTUS record.
Yeah.
Like, this is not, we didn't get this from Twitter or some media source.
This will bring the opinion.
We read the actual.
So the supported essential, sorry, I was wrong. They, Paxton's office, so they sued in state court because Texas has a eminent domain. The state took something mechanism that they can use, because the state has to allow you to sue itself, but under the takings clause, they still have that automatic right. Paxton's office sought to move the case and successfully moved the case from state court to federal court. And when it moved it to federal court, they tried to dismiss it. They tried to get rid of it, and then they had the case just kind of done in weird ways. The state of Texas. The state of Texas tried to manipulate the case to, how they wanted to manipulate it. The trial court initially denied that, but the Fifth Circuit out of New Orleans, which oversees Texas, overturned that and agreed with the Texas Attorney General's office. Well, it went to the SCOTUS, went to the Supreme Court of the United States, and the Supreme Court ruled 9-0 that the case should be remanded back to the state and dismissed in federal court. So basically, their opinion was, this isn't a federal issue, so you're kind of right that it should be dismissed in federal court, but it should go back to the state court. So the landowners who originally sought to bring the case in state court are going to get their day in the state court that they wanted to have it in all along. So this is just another delay tactic from Ken Paxton. I guess if you wanted a lawyer, he will go delay something for you, but not necessarily win. You go to Ken Paxton.
And I'm still you also have Ken Paxton,
we talked about it. But Ken Paxton, he got out of his charge, his securities charges things, and he didn't admit any guilt, and it kind of went away. But he has to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars for that privilege. So,
and a few other things, but I'm still trying to figure out how he did put out a a statement, a very public statement, which I read, how he's claiming a win. Like, I didn't really understand how that was. The SCOTUS ruling was a win for him. It was a win for the landowners, and the state of Texas didn't want this case. Like, I'm so confused.
Well, what's happened is people are starting to catch on to the fact that Ken Paxton kept saying he's the people's champion, but he keeps losing. So he's just trying to say, we won, whenever they have any sort of case, to kind of get in front of the fact that he keeps losing cases. And he lost this one 9-0. Every justice, including the 6 Republican or conservative justices, were like, no, Paxton, you're not doing it right. So either A, he's just hiring bad people and they're not getting the job done, or B, they're doing exactly what he wanted them to do and they're still not getting the job done. Like, Paxton keeps claiming to be the people's champion. He's out there fighting, but he keeps losing.
Yeah.
It's frustrating to see. He's also suing this Harris County right now.
I was going to ask.
Yeah. So Lina Hidalgo, the esteemed, honorable Lina Hidalgo from Harris County, who is under significant ethics investigation, or at least her office is under significant ethics investigation. Some of her people are being charged or already pled. Had some sort of universal basic income. This is the idea, like, you just give everybody in a certain area a set amount of money each month. And Paxton's basically suing, saying it's not equal because they're only doing it in certain zip codes. I don't really know how that's going to go, because she's trying to give like $1,000 or $2,000 a month to every Harris County citizen that lives in a certain, like, 10 specific zip codes, and they want to kind of test and see how does this improve outcomes or whatever else. And since it's a pilot program, I don't really know how Paxton's argument's going to hold up. I also haven't looked too hard to see if there's other legal arguments that they're making. That's just what it's being reported as. That's the main argument. So I don't know how Paxton's going to do on there. I don't think it's a good idea to do a universal basic income, especially the way that they're trying to do it in Harris County. So I don't.
Because, for one thing, and I'm not saying this is true of a large portion of any demographic, but there's a certain percentage who'll be like, oh, all right, I'm getting a universal, money per month, right?
Yeah.
Money per month, X number of dollars, however much it is. I'll live on that. And why get a job? And I'm not saying that's not most people, but like I don't want to no, if you have a job and, and I don't care if you're working at McDonald's, man, it's honest work. So, unless you cannot physically, or you have a mental illness, unless there is a good reason for you not to work, you need to be working. And that's why we have the system we have, is to help those people who are low income.
Sure. And that's more of a general argument against UBI. Yeah. And that's a general argument against universal basic income. There are some conservative arguments for universal basic income if it's paired with like massive reductions in like Social Security, Medicaid, etc., where like it's cheaper just to give everybody some money or whatever amount of money than it is to administer those programs for fraud and everything else, because those welfare programs are massive, and most of the money doesn't end up getting down to the people who it's ostensibly for. So there are some arguments where it's like, let's just give everybody money. Right. And then it's whatever. I'm not really sure how I feel about once again, this is nuanced, like kind of boring policy when you get down to it. And I don't really know, like I haven't spent the time to figure out what I think one way or the other on it. I'm generally against the welfare state generally. So instead of just giving people UBI, I would look at limiting the welfare state as a whole. But there has to be some social safety nets for sure. It's just, I think it's kind of inflated at this point. So that's all of that to say is like, I don't know if I don't feel comfortable with the odds of any lawsuit that Ken Paxton's office brings. And I don't want to give Lina Hidalgo and Harris County Democrats the opportunity to claim a victory anytime ever. Like it just seems like if Ken Paxton's involved, I feel like we're going to lose. So
I mean,
praying that he wins one.
Yeah, the whole thing seems. I really want to dig into this more, but we didn't. This all just came up, so we didn't have a chance to like really do a deep dive into it. We'll get to it later.
We'll get into it whenever there's a decision on it, one way or the other.
Right. So, and speaking of Texas, the lieutenant governor had issued late last week, I think it was, some interim charges.
Yeah, which explain what those are.
So they're out of session.
Yeah.
The entire state capitol is out of session. They will not be in session until next January. However, during session, they can have.
You mean during the interim?
I'm sorry. Yes, not during session. Between sessions, called the interim. They can have committee meetings. They can have study groups. They can research all kinds of things. And one of these charges, in other words, hey, y'all go study this, is to get rid of property taxes in Texas, period.
I think it's technically it isn't telling them to do it. It's telling them to research the feasibility or research like what can happen with it. So
okay. All right. Okay, that's fair. Yeah, that's fair. And while I'm all about like less taxes. Yeah. Sure. I have some questions, and you correctly said, the feasibility, for instance, your property taxes part of your property taxes go to support the public schools. And however you feel about public school education is up to you. And I am not here to tell you how to feel about that. I have my own thoughts. But for today, there is an obligation to provide education, free education. If we have no property taxes, how does that get paid for? And I await anxiously the answer to that, because I would love to do away with property taxes.
Yeah.
I love the idea that when you pay off your mortgage, you don't, unless you live in an HOA, you own your house free, clear, and like if you want to keep it and retire in it, you're good to go.
Well, so you have state taxes, you have local taxes, you have federal taxes. Most of the federal taxes people are going to pay are going to be income taxes. In Texas, most of your state level taxes are going to be from things outside of are going to be from sales tax. Most of the sales tax goes to the state. I think 2% of it, the state sales tax in Texas is about 8.25%, and most of the state, 2 of those pennies per whatever dollar go to different local options. But I think it's like something like 6 of those cents go to the state. And then you also have business tax, like the franchise tax and a bunch of other fees and stuff that go towards state government. So most of the local taxation comes from property taxes. So it's your local entities, it's your cities, it's your counties, it's your community college district, it's your school district. It's mostly the school district. Usually about 50% of your property tax bill is going to be your school district bill. And, they're kind of getting out of hand because property values are going up. Well, there are a number of reasons why property taxes are kind of, if you're going to have a tax, property taxes are pretty good. It's mostly because property taxes are stable during different economic environments. They don't go up crazy just because a lot of people made a lot more money, and they don't disappear because no one's spending money if there's a recession like a sales tax. So it kind of ensures like a reliable amount of money each and every year, because property values don't fluctuate that crazily typically. And then they support local issues, but they also give localities an option to kind of manage what's good for that community. Like a lot of stuff gets passed, a lot of the tax rate stuff gets passed via bond, and we have all these VATRE elections that we've talked about in the past, where the government entity at this point, some of the reforms they've made, if they try to increase something over 4%, the tax rate over 4%, then it goes to a vote for the people to decide whether they want to pay more taxes. And so you have a lot more local input on what those tax rates should be. So it's not great. Thomas Sowell historically has been for property taxes, but it's been on the unimproved value. He doesn't think people should be penalized for adding value for structures. So
Putting a house on.
So as land becomes more valuable because it's in a downtown area, the price should increase. But just because you put a house on a piece of land and you put a nice house on it versus a small house, you shouldn't be penalized for adding that extra value. And I kind of tend to think that there's going to be a property tax reform. We go in that direction where we're only going to tax the land value, not the improvement value. So those are some of the main kind of justifications for property tax. But it's a tax. People hate taxes. You don't want to be for any kind of tax. You just kind of want them to all be lower and for the government to not spend as much money. So, but you have to have the question of, where do you want to take the money from? Do we want to have less money going to public schools? We want to have less money going towards roads? What is the thing you want to cut? You can't just be like, I want to spend 20% less. I'm like, that's great. I want to make 20% more money.
Right.
Okay, so but how am I going to make that 20% more money? Am I going to get a part-time job? Am I going to, am I going to spend 20% less? Like, how do you want to do it? So, I think that this is mostly going to be a case where, like, listen, the RPT had one of their things, whenever we voted on the Republican primary, one of the kind of propositions of things we'd look at or wanted to have as a priority would be the elimination of property taxes.
Right.
Fantastic. Great.
Sounds like a great idea in theory.
It's a huge, it's a fantastic idea. Let's go ahead. But I think this is more of an idea for Dan Patrick to appease those people. To appease just like the people in the party who are doing that. And basically it's going to come down and say, no, we can't get rid of it. You also got to keep in mind, there's somebody like Paul Betancourt, Senator Betancourt out of North Houston. His job is a property tax appraisal, like defender, like basically somebody who argues for your property tax appraisal. I don't remember what it's called. That's what his entire business is. So like, yeah, he's a property tax expert, but he also has a vested interest in certain things. Like whenever you have any of these property tax comes through, he ends up having like a huge say in whether or not how property taxes are going to be reformed, which is one of the reasons why a lot of people think the Senate pushed for a larger for your deduction to go from 40,000 to 100,000. Really, over the past 4 years, it went from 20,000 to 100,000. Is that you still would need somebody to go fight your appraisal, to have somebody go fight if your appraisal went up. And instead of the governor and House's major plan, which has been to spend a lot more money towards compression, which is the idea that there are certain local tax rates and that the state government would use state dollars to pay that, and so that people would have a rebate on their next year's taxes. So it's kind of convoluted way because, like, you mentioned before, like, why don't we just do like a rebate or something as a tax credit for like instead of ESAs? It's because Texas doesn't have an income tax. You don't really have that system set up in place to give money back to people, since it's only property owners who are paying the vast majority of stuff. So you'd have to build out a ton of government infrastructure to give those types of monies back to people. So that's just kind of where the property taxes land as an issue, where it's like, we can get rid of it. I think largely this is just a dog and pony show to say, like, oh, this is like the possible feasibility, but it doesn't seem like it's going to be very realistic unless the Senate comes out and says we're going to want to cut a bunch of stuff. But then people never want to cut their services either. So you might have, Dan Patrick come out with some funny math and say, oh, we're going to do it anyway. And then it's just going to be, that'll be the next issue that people fight over.
It's going to be a very complicated issue. That's for sure.
But I also want to talk about one last thing.
Absolutely.
That because the Lieutenant Governor sent out a letter yesterday to the TCEQ, the Texas basically the Texas
Envi-
EPA
Commission on Environmental Quality.
Yeah. There was a cement plant in mine that's looking to get approval to go into South Grayson County, which is Grayson County is where my family's lived for 120, 130 years. And
I wondered how you caught that. Okay, now
so like,
I know.
So there's been some Fulces in Grayson County since like the turn of the 19th century, or 1900s, and so there's this plant going in, but there's been some massive investment that's gone into Grayson County over the past 3 years from both Texas Instruments and from Global Wafer, which are like, we're talking about $30 million projected from TI and $5 billion from Global Wafer. The Global Wafer facility is already under construction and nearly done. The TI first phase is under construction. What happens with a cement plant, though, is that basically there's an issue where there's going to be a lot of air issues that come from a cement plant. It's one of the largest types of polluters in the country. It's up there with like natural gas, like or oil refining, that kind of thing.
Right.
And that it just puts up a lot of particulates in the air. Apparently can cause cancers and reproductive issues and all sorts of asthma and COPD problems. Excuse me as I cough, thinking about it. But so you have that kind of that structure being looking to get approval to be built. You also have all these $1 billion of investments already going into this high tech field, when a cement plant can really go in anywhere, and a cement mine can go in anywhere there's limestone.
Yeah.
Right. But this company that's trying to put it in is called Black Mountain. Apparently, Black Mountain has hired former state rep Chris Patty, who Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick does not like. He put out a tweet after Patty left the state ledge and went into the lobby, and was being like, and then like he, I don't remember which reporter had tweeted this, so I apologize. But apparently that Patrick like added the different clients like TXU Energy, etc., and said, "Hey, just want to let you know that Chris Patty will have absolutely no access to my office because of his behavior on the grid issues or something from a couple of years ago." It was just like, okay. So who knows if this is personal? I don't think so, because like I was talking to I saw from like there was all of these town halls over this issue, and Grayson County put out like 5 or 6, maybe even 700 people to this town hall. Now it was between Sherman and Denison. There's a combined population between the two is about 60,000. And they got 500 to 700 people to show up on a Monday night to go complain about air issues.
Right.
I've never, in all my time living in Grayson County, seen that many people show up any place except for high school football. That is the only thing that can get that kind of crowd.
Friday Night Lights, baby.
I don't even think the churches get that many people. Any given church gets that many people on Easter. Maybe a couple of the churches get that many people on Easter, but like that's about it. Church, God, football, and apparently this issue. So
cement factories, yeah. So when you texted me about this issue, of course, I'm married to an expert in semiconductors, microchips, this, that, the other thing. And so I was like, all right, explain this to me, walk me through this. Like I knew some, and of course what you had said to me, jived with what I knew, but I wanted to know more. And for those of you who are not married to experts, from having seen concrete poured, mixed, whatever, that there's all this powder. And even though the cement plant is planned for 5 miles away from this $1 billion semiconductor plant, the wind can still push these little tiny particulates through the clean rooms and get into like a microchip, which will destroy the microchip they're trying to build, Also, those microchips go into, into a wafer. I think I have that right. I'll have to check with Mr. Semiconductor.
Yeah, the wafer is like the core of it. That thing's kind of attached.
So the wafer is inside the chip. So, but if you're making the wafers and you get dust in the wafers, it doesn't matter if it gets into the chip. It's still so this, and I just remember it's like at least $1 billion industry being built 5 miles away.
Yeah, 35 billion.
There's no, unless, did you say the name of the company was BlackRock?
No, it's Black
Mountain.
Black Mountain.
Yeah. So, I mean, if Black Mountain can come up with some way to mitigate this,
sure.
Fine.
But I mean, there's just like
we're not hearing anything.
You have those investments going in that have already been like approved and they're already being built. You also have like thousands of homes being built right near where this cement plant's going to be going into. Right. The plats are already done. That's already being developed. You have 10 to 15,000 new plats within 10 miles because of people coming up 289 to Gunner, which is like the next step after Prosper, which is where Dallas is pushing up into. So you have all these people who are supposed to be moving into this area, all to have one mining operation here. But also the wafer part of this isn't being talked about enough. Like right now, the overwhelming majority of the highest tech semiconductors are being produced in Taiwan. Now you have a whole supply chain of semiconductors being created in the Southeast Asia, with all these different countries having specialized in different aspects of it and moving around. But Taiwan is kind of the linchpin of this highest end aspect of it. And what we found during COVID was when this supply chain gets messed up, like it drastically reduces just the amount of stuff you can build that's up to today's level of technology.
Mm-hmm.
With China getting angrier or more and more aggressive towards Taiwan and starting to posture more that they might try and invade, any sort of issue there would put our computing and semiconductor production back in the United States back at least 5 years, and we would not have that type of growth. So what we're trying to do right now is we're trying to catch up our manufacturing. These are good manufacturing jobs. These are 6-figure manufacturing jobs that are going to Texas. Also, that one mine can build, a plant. And I mean, I think Senator Springer said at the TCEQ town hall, Texas, we just gotten used to winning so much. We win all these different bids all the time.
Right.
Maybe it's time for Oklahoma to get a win. Like let this go somewhere else. And it's like, yeah, we don't have to win every single thing, and we need to make sure we have a balance. Like that's why we have zoning. You don't want to have a school next to a bar. You don't want to have a strip club next to a church. You want to have, there are certain
school places next to a jail.
Right. Yeah. You don't want to have a mine you wouldn't put a mine in downtown Houston. Like you don't want to have these things close to large population centers or fast growing population centers. Mm. So I'm hoping that TCEQ puts a pause on this permitting process and allows the legislature to come in and review it so they can pass and give them, so TCEQ can get instruction from the legislature, from the people, so that they know where and when to approve this type of facility.
Yeah. And I can't think that with this kind of public outcry, with Lieutenant Governor, with our friend of the show, Senator Drew Springer, with the attention that it's getting, that this isn't going to at least be pressed pause, if not be moved elsewhere.
I don't know. I mean, I who knows? Sometimes they're obligated to move certain ways, and then it would go to the courts, and who knows? I just know that the players on it's gotten political, so it's probably going to get jammed up for a little bit. So we'll see how that plays out. But Andi, I think we had a good show today. We kind of changed up the format a little bit, and we went a little bit longer than I was expecting us to go. But if you're watching this on the YouTube channel, please like and subscribe. We have episodes every Wednesday, and our Twitters are at the Seeing Red Pod. That's also the Facebook, and our emails at hosts@seeingredpodcast.com. So thank you so much for joining us and listening to us on the podcast or watching us on YouTube. And we'll see you next week.
See you next week. Bye, guys.
Bye, guys.
You've been listening to the Seeing Red podcast. It's always Texas politics and beyond. We present the facts and opinions. The Seeing Red podcast with your host, Andi Turner and Garrett Fulce. Thank you, and tune in next week. And please do us a favor. Hit the subscribe button so you don't miss a single episode.